we just introduced the concept of the if statement, and I want to just add a couple more things to this, and then we're going to do one more example that summarizes everything we learned yesterday. So just a reminder, the first two lines here, we're just defining variables. Anything on the left of the equal sign is the variable name. Anything on the right of the equal sign is the value. So this exp1 variable has the value 400, exp2 has the value 500. And then we have this if statement where if exp1 is greater than or equal to exp2, we do the first thing. So if exp1 is greater than exp2, we do the first thing, else we do the second thing. So when you run this code, it's going to check whether exp1 is greater than or equal to exp2. Because exp1 is not greater than exp2, it will do the else statement, and you'll get that the max is equal to exp2, where exp2 is 500. And because we don't have semicolons on the end of that line, what's printed to the screen is that the max is equal to 500. So just to add one more thing you can do with these if statements is you can have this else if command. So you can have if something is true, do one thing, else if something else is true, do something else. And you can have as many of these as you want. You can check as many conditions as you want. So in this example, we might want to check whether one gene expression is greater than the other, whether it's the same as the other, or whether it's less than the other. So you would do that like this. The start of the code looks very similar. I've actually set the two expression values to be the same. So you can just edit the code that you used yesterday if you still have it, or feel free to do this in another editor document. Remember, this window with the numbers at the side, with the tab at the top showing our file name, is the editor part of the MATLAB software, and the command window at the bottom that says command window at the top and has those chevrons at the start of the line is the command window where you write individual commands. So either start a new document or edit the one you have open, and then we're going to set exp1 and exp2 both to 400, and then we're going to have this if, else if, and else statement. The first bit looks very much the same as what we did before. If exp1 is greater than exp2, will only be true if expression 1 is greater than expression 2. Else if expression 1 is equivalent to expression 2. Remember, those two equal signs are a test of equivalence, so it'll test whether those two things are the same. So only if the first thing wasn't true will it check the else if statement. So only if the expression 1 was not greater than expression 2 will it keep going and check the else if statement. So if expression 1 is greater than expression 2, do one thing. Else, if that wasn't true, check whether expression 1 is equivalent to expression 2. And if it is, we're going to set max equal to this string that says both are equal. And then the final else, if neither of the previous things have been true, so if expression 1 wasn't greater than expression 2, and expression 1 was not equivalent to expression 2, we have this final else where we set max equal to the expression 2 value. And we always end our if statements with an end. Notice we only have an end after the final else. So you start with an if, you then have your else if, as many else ifs as you want, a final else to do if nothing else is happening, and then you always have an end statement at the very end. Okay, so if you type in all of this and hit run, either by hitting the big play button in your editor or by typing ifstatement.m into your command window, you should see that max has been set to this string that says both are equal. And the reason that occurs is that our else if line, where expression 1 is equivalent to expression 2, has been found to be true, because expression 1 is equivalent to expression 2, and therefore we've set max equal to both are equal. So the way these if and else statements after each other work is that the first one that's found true will make it stop looking. So if the if statement is found to be true, it's not going to check all the other conditions. Doesn't matter how many more else if statements you have after that, it's not going to check them. So if you have 10 else ifs in a row and the second one is found to be true, it's not going to bother with any of the others. So it's actually, when it comes to optimizing your code and when you are working on much larger data sets, it becomes important to start thinking about which conditions are most likely to be true. Because when you are thinking about how fast your code runs, one of the things that slows down your code are these comparisons. So every time you are checking whether something is greater than something or equivalent to something, that's a little bit of computing power. So what you want to do is have the most common conditions handled first, and then get more and more down into the less and less common conditions. But this is a more advanced thing that only is really going to matter when you start having to wait a long time for your code to run. And as you can see, when you press play right now, your code takes less than a second to finish anyway, so we don't need to worry about optimizing too much at this point. Okay, and just to step things up even further, you can actually nest these things together. And this is where it becomes very important to have laid out your code correctly, to have indentations to give you a handy guide about which code belongs in which statement. So what this is going to do, most of the code is the same. If you ignore the stuff that's indented again in the first condition, the code is exactly the same. We still have two variables set. We still check whether one is greater than the other. If the first one is not greater than the second one, we're going to check whether they're equal. And then if neither of those two things have been true, we have one final else statement. However, I've added an extra thing here where if the expression 1 is greater than the expression 2, I'm then going to check how much greater it is. So I have another if statement within that first if statement. So these are nested inside each other. So if expression 1 is greater than 2, I'm then going to check whether expression 1 minus expression 2 is greater than 50. So what the difference between expression 1 and expression 2 is. If it's greater than 50, I'm going to print using the fprintf command we saw yesterday, whether I'm going to print that expression 1 is much bigger. If the difference between expression 1 and expression 2 is not greater than 50, we'll reach the else statement, and then we will print that expression 1 is slightly bigger. And then we have an end. So that all occurs within this first if statement. So this code is only going to be run if expression 1 is greater than expression 2. And we're still going to have this statement max equals expression 1, because the max value is still expression 1. So the rest of the code is very much the same. Notice I changed the values to make expression 1 slightly bigger than expression 2. So when you run it, what you should see is that it checks whether expression 1 is greater than expression 2, finds that it is, so goes into the if statement. The first thing within the if statement is another if statement. It checks whether expression 1 minus expression 2 is greater than 50. That's going to be false, because expression 1 minus expression 2 is going to evaluate to 40. 40 greater than 50 is going to be false. So it's going to not run the if statement here. It's going to run the else statement instead. And it's going to fprintf that expression 1 is slightly bigger. Then it will end that if statement. It will print that max is greater than exp1, and then jump to the end of the code. So you should see printed to your screen that expression 1 is slightly bigger, and that the max was expression 1. So the single equal sign is used for assigning and updating variables. So if I have my var equals 7, whereas the double equal sign is similar to the greater than or less than symbol. It's for checking. It's a logical check that's either true or false, depending on whether they are the same or not. So double equals is a check of equality. 7 equivalent to 7 would be true. 7 equivalent to 6 would be false. And the equivalent is those two equals. So this line here is checking whether exp1 is the same as exp2. And that would be true if these were both 400, for example.